Old Golly says, Harriet, what's wrong? Harriet says, the whole world! And then she adds, well, that and maybe I ran into the house again and broke a ton of plates, and now Mom's super mad. And then she begs Old Golly to talk to Mom so that she can get Harriet out of trouble. Harriet's trying to get out of her timeout so that she can watch the Lady Cosmonaut on TV. And Old Golly's answer is, I will do no such thing, Harriet M. Welsh. Wow! Old Golly really does have her head in the right place. She cares about what's right for Harriet and knows when it's appropriate for Harriet to be disciplined and learn a lesson. And what I just said right now is further solidified when Old Golly says, you've got to start looking out for people besides yourself. You tell her. We've seen it time and time again on this show that this is a skill that Harriet seriously needs to work on. But she is working on it, though. Like, Harriet's kind of in a transitional phase when it comes to the concept of looking out for other people besides herself. In episode 1, Harriet felt bad for, what was her name? Mrs. Plummer, the lady with the dogs, after Harriet had gone in and spied on her and then got caught and scared her. I was going to say that Harriet was looking out for Mrs. Plummer by going back and convincing her to get out of bed and get on with her life, but I wonder if her motivation was primarily towards that, or if she was just going back in there to, like, first of all, try to get herself out of trouble by taking the risk of potentially getting in trouble again, but also completing her mission of getting an interesting story for her history project for school. Like, was she doing that to get what she wanted? I mean, she kind of was, but how concerned was she about what Mrs. Plummer wanted to do? Well, Harriet did become pretty invested in it, because we had that whole big scene where Harriet jumped on Mrs. Plummer's bed and said right to her face that if you don't get off your butt and get on with your life, I'm going to barge into your room like a maniac every single day for the rest of your life. Please, do something here. Like, was she that desperate to get the perfect story for her project? Or did she really care? I don't know. I would like to think that she cared. Maybe she did, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about that. If you don't remember exactly what happened, you can go back and watch that episode of Harriet the Spy, and or listen to my 3-hour discussion about it that we did back in January. Next in episode 2 was the coat vote, and in that one, Harriet was trying to rally up the kids in her class to convince Marion Hawthorne that it was okay for Harriet to wear the same coat that Marion was wearing, and that it didn't matter that they had the same coat, and Harriet liked her Smithers of London coats as much as Marion liked hers. And she said to Old Golly that night that she was trying to make the world a better place for both Pinky Whitehead and the boy with the purple socks. And I guess Harriet saw how Marion was manipulating those two boys to try to get them on her side, and then Harriet got to talk to them, and they all understood that the two boys didn't want to be on Marion's side at all, and that they were actually on Harriet's side. So, yeah, that kind of brings us back around again. Was Harriet's desire to help those boys and everybody else in her class due to the fact that she was genuinely concerned about them? Or did she want to help them only because they were going to be on her side regarding the coat vote? And yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is definitely going to be another 2-hour podcast. These Harriet episodes, I have a lot more to say about these than I do about Reading Rainbow, Kipper, or Frog and Toad. I'm surprised. And then, of course, we had last month's episode, Cross My Heart and Hope Not to Dance, with the dancing school. And in that one, we specifically got to see Harriet's selfish side when she wanted Janie to help her rebel against the traditional norms of dance class, which in the end ended up backfiring because even though Janie was on Harriet's side at first, Janie later decided that she liked dance, and that totally threw Harriet off. Because by wanting to make a difference in that class, we could assume for a minute that Harriet wants to try to change things and make things better for all the kids, but then on the other hand, well, we did kind of figure out later that Harriet was only doing it to get the other kids on her side about her opinions and how she felt about dancing school and whether or not the tradition should be followed. And in the end, Harriet did learn that the way she treated Jeannie was wrong, and she eventually helped Jeannie get back into the class after they had gotten kicked out. And it seemed like Harriet eventually did become concerned about what Janie wanted because we saw Harriet peeking into Janie's window and seeing how much she enjoyed dancing and missed it. And at the very end, Harriet told us that a best friend has to know when to lead and when to follow. So, Harriet is continually in the process of learning how to, know when it's appropriate to think about her own wants and needs and to look out for other people besides herself. So in each episode, she gets a little bit somewhere, but, she's far from perfect. She's got a long ways to go. And here, in the prologue of this episode, Harriet wasn't thinking. She wasted her subway money on the newspaper, and she couldn't get on the train. She wasn't able to get any change anywhere, and then she had to run home in the rain, and being entirely focused on the TV show that she wanted to watch, and not thinking about the safety of the people around her, specifically her mother carrying all those dishes, Harriet ran into the house with her soaking wet shoes, slipped on the floor, and then crashed into her mother, and then all the plates fell down and crashed. So in that moment, Harriet was only thinking about how much she wanted to see the Lady Cosmonaut on TV, and not thinking at all about what her actions might potentially do to other people. Because yes, it was an accident, and Harriet certainly didn't mean for the plates to break, but then her mother said, "Harriet, how many times have I told you not to run in the house?" So apparently, Harriet has ran the house before, and her mother had told her not to, which means that this situation had two major problems. Number one, she carelessly ran into the house and slipped and crashed into her mother with the plates, and that was an accident, of course, but it was also a case of disobedience, or in other words, ignoring something important that your parents told you, which is not running in the house. So, this is weird. It is an accident, but it's not an accident at the same time. Harriet didn't mean for it to happen, but it wouldn't have happened if she had been more careful coming into the house with wet shoes and actually cared about her mother's warnings about running in the house. Which leads to kind of a third problem. In that moment, Harriet believed that seeing the Lady Cosmonaut on TV was 1,000 times more important than anything else, including the potential safety of the people around her. And Harriet thought that getting to the TV on time was more important than listening to or remembering what her mother had told her before about running in the house. I hope this is making sense to you. I'm not the best person in the world for explaining this, but hopefully you can see what I'm thinking about here. So anyhow, let me back it up for a second. Right when old Golly was saying, "I will do no such thing, young lady." No, she didn't say young lady. She said, "Here, I will do no such thing, Harriet M. Welsh." Yeah, there we go. We can see old Golly's entire room there almost. Lovely room. Lots and lots and lots of books. Old Golly's room is practically a library. Is old Golly a writer? I don't recall seeing anything in the original book about old Golly being a writer. Well, old Golly definitely loves to read because she's always quoting things that she'd read in books, like famous philosophers and poets and stuff. I don't know, maybe that desk that old Golly's sitting at is just a place where she writes letters to her friends and family. And as Harriet was coming in, old Golly was reading a book there. So that must be where she sits down to read her many books. If I could have any house in the world, I wouldn't mind having a bedroom like that with all those built-in bookshelves up high on the walls. And there's so many books, it's even got a little, one of those ladders that's, slides back and forth like they have at old-fashioned bookstores and libraries. Okay, moving along then. Old Golly says, "You gotta start looking out for people besides yourself." And Harriet says, "Why? Nobody's looking out for me." And old Golly says, "That's simply untrue." And old Golly is right again. I agree, that simply is untrue. Because when you think about it, I do a lot of thinking on this podcast, if you haven't already gathered. Excuse me. And I do a lot of talking, too, and my voice is starting to get a little dry again. The way Harriet perceived her mother's reaction made Harriet feel like her mother didn't care about her. Because, like I said, at that moment, Harriet thought the most important thing was seeing the astronaut on TV, and the fact that her mother was making her go up to her room so that she couldn't watch it, Harriet perceived that as, her mother being disrespectful and not looking out for her. On top of all the other bad things that had happened during that prologue, for instance, in the subway station at the turnstiles, she asked that cop for a dime, but of course, he wouldn't give her one. He told Harriet to get out. And Harriet thought that because the cop wouldn't give her any money, he wasn't looking out for her. Then at the Garcia store, she ran there with money shoes, and Mrs. Garcia didn't give Harriet any change because she was very concerned about Harriet trucking mud into the store and told her to leave, which made Harriet didn't think that she didn't care either. And then this other guy had that Canadian coin that shouldn't have existed yet. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say something about that. I was just thinking about that this morning when Harriet said, "I don't have time for loonies." The fact that this guy had a Canadian coin called a loonie in 1964 when loonies hadn't been invented yet until 87, I thought to myself, that by definition is pretty loony. I wonder if they did that on purpose. I wonder if the writers were laughing about that. Harriet saying "I don't have time for loonies" could actually have two meanings. I mean, it most likely means that Harriet doesn't have time to listen to this guy talking about his Canadian coin, but it could also be something that a person would say when they don't have time for somebody to, talk nonsense or be silly. It could be adjacent to somebody saying, "Cut the comedy" or "No time for funny business." I don't have time for loonies. Have you guys ever used those words in that context before? I don't think I've ever heard it before, but I think it would be great. I might use it someday. If I want somebody to stop being silly. Because, yeah, a 1987 Canadian loonie in 1964 would be a loony situation that Harriet doesn't have time for. Oh my goodness. So anywho, Harriet was trying to get past this guy who was talking about his Canadian coin, and she felt that this guy didn't care about her because to her it seems like that he cared more about his Canadian coin because he was talking about how he just came from Montreal and that's why he had it. And Harriet perceived that situation as this guy not looking out for her. A few seconds later, she ran out of the store, got her foot run over. I'm surprised it hurt. Her foot didn't get broken because I assumed that hot dog cart would be pretty heavy. Her foot got run over by the wheel of the hot dog cart and she hurt her foot. And instead of the hot dog man asking Harriet if she was okay or apologizing, he just angrily said, "Watch where you're going, kid." And that actually is pretty justifiable. Harriet's thinking that that guy is not looking out for her. And then, of course, it started raining, and she felt like the weather wasn't looking out for her. And then, of course, she went to the house and slipped, and there was that plate accident with her mother. And rather than caring about what Harriet wanted, which was to watch the astronaut on TV, she cared more about Harriet breaking the plates and also breaking the rule of not running in the house. And so Harriet felt like her mother wasn't looking out for her because she couldn't do what she wanted. So that was how Harriet felt in all those situations, and that's why she's trying to tell old Golly now that, why? Nobody's looking out for me. Why should I look out for other people besides myself?